Money glitches have always been a key part of the Gran Turismo series. This is something that's always been around, however it's more prominent than ever in Gran Turismo 7, and there's a good reason for that, with cars costing upwards of 20 million credits and the economy never really catering towards the player. In fact, a lot of it originally was pushing players to go ahead and purchase microtransactions. However, most players have been finding their way around GT7 for the last 2.5 years to gain an advantage. So today we're going to look at the history of the money glitches within Gran Turismo 7 so far. Okay, so let's head over to day one of the game, March 2022. How were players going about finding money in this game? And honestly, it was very hard to come by. In fact, when this game launched, the economy was absolutely abysmal. And the go-to for this one was over at Fisherman's Ranch for this one-lap sprint race called Dirt Champions. This was essentially a head-to-head duel with another Group B rally car. It was one of the Chili Pepper events. Overall, it took around about 3 to 3.5 minutes maximum, and unfortunately over time it has had its payout nerfed. You was looking at around about 900,000 credits every single hour with this one. All you did was start from a standing start, hold the brake, beat the AI, and then spend the rest of the race trying not to smack into the barriers so you could get that 50% clean race bonus. Overall, it was a fairly easy method and rather quite efficient, but very boring overall. Again, this took around about 3 to 3.5 minutes, so it was done and dusted in no time, and you was constantly running it over the hour. It was a nice little credit booster, and at the time 900,000 credits was a fair amount of money. Of course, it's not like that anymore, but this was probably when GT7's economy was absolutely at its worst. Funnily enough, these days we're looking at around about 22 minutes to earn the same amount of money we was earning in one single hour. So what came next was the Big Four. Of course, I'm talking about the 4 big money grinding events which are still prevalent in today's game. So the first of these was the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. This was the WTC 800 1-hour event, and in fact I will go on to say this is perhaps the best event in GT7 entirely, and it's a shame that Polyphony never really went ahead and did more of these. So it was an hour-long event with a full 20 car grid. It was looking at cars for 800 pp or less. Now in terms of the payout, it was 1 million credits, but the clean race bonus was relatively easy to get. Just don't go ahead and get that yellow flag penalty, and he was looking at 1.5 million credits per hour. In terms of the event, it's fantastic. It's a day-night cycle, it's got weather, it's got absolutely everything crammed into one single event. And again, like I said, it's just a shame Polyphony never really went back and took advantage of these mechanics more for other grinding events. This was the true taste of what GT7 can do with endurance events, with the day-night, the drying line, the wet weather. It was absolutely spot on, and you was making a decent amount of money. It's just a shame that Polyphony are reluctant to continue to do this, and really should change that focus into bringing back endurance events. However, this one also went hand in hand with another WTC 800 event. This one was over at Sardinia. Now this is essentially the easy mode money grind. It does pay slightly less, at around about 700k every single 22 to 26 minutes, car dependent. The good thing about this event though was everything that you was using at Spa or Sardinia was interchangeable, so really you just had one car that could tackle 2 money grind events. Overall, this one probably is the weakest of the bunch, but it is certainly the easiest. The next one is of course the 700 pp event. This is catering to 700 pp cars obviously, over at Le Mans. This is actually a timed event for 30 minutes, does pay slightly more than Sardinia, and does feature some pretty great features such as variable and randomized weather, meaning that every single run feels quite different. The good thing about this event with the timer itself, as long as you got yourself a good lead ahead of the AI, you could go ahead and pull off the stop and wait method, meaning that as soon as the 30 minutes ticked over, you'd drive across the line and that would be it. Not a bad event at all. And of course the final of the Big Four is the WTC 600, mainly aiming at road cars and probably the most notorious. In fact, this event was so overpowered that they ended up making it even harder to get that clean race bonus over time. Once upon a time, this was again quite an easy one, as long as you just stayed off the barrier, you won't get penalties and such. They removed that and then made it that if you collide or go over some of the cones, that basically you would lose that clean race bonus, unlike the other 3 events. So whilst this was definitely the most difficult of the 4, overall it was probably the best and most abusable of the bunch. So overall, the big 4 would allow you to earn 1.7 to 1.9 million credits fully legitimately. But of course, players were going to go ahead and take advantage of that. So at first, when these events released, there was still the money grinding cars, some of them were better than others. We saw the likes of the Tomahawk S being quite good, but really nothing stood out as a fully glitch build until a certain vehicle came along back on Tokyo. Of course, I'm talking about the Tomahawk Begins era. This was the first time we saw the Tomahawk appear in its 600 pp form in what ended up as a tug of war between Polyphony and the players. Was basically the players glitching the Tomahawk to 600 pp, Polyphony would then patch it, and then players would go ahead and break it again. This was really the first time that we saw the players giving a proper middle finger to Polyphony and actually beating them at their own game. So if you wasn't there for GT7's launch, what happened when the reviews came out? The economy was very stable and very fair. However, upon day 1 of the game actually launching, Polyphony went ahead, added the microtransactions and changed up the economy. Now at that point, players of course found that first rally event, and that was all well and good. It still wasn't absolutely perfect and you were still grinding for hours upon hours just for one single car. However, they did then go ahead and absolutely nerf events into oblivion before bringing the big 4. So at this point, the player base was absolutely fuming. This didn't feel like the Gran Turismo economy that we do typically see. So along comes the Tomahawk, capable of earning upwards of 2.4 million credits per hour, and ensued one of the biggest wars I've ever seen with a player base versus the developer. In fact, it was so prominent in the game that every single week, Polyphony will basically go ahead and attempt to patch out the Tomahawk for players just to go ahead and re-break it within a couple of hours. It was absolutely hilarious to see, and in fact, because of this build, we had a massive overhaul of the tuning system on what counts as the PP rating and what doesn't. It was absolutely great to just watch the player base just go absolutely to town on Polyphony to show them that, well, you ain't going to stop us earning credits and we're not going ahead and buying your microtransactions. Honestly, the Tomahawk X just felt a little bit like the Robin Hood of the Gran Turismo world. However, eventually Polyphony would get the better of the player base, and that's going to move me into the next era, the alternative era. So what happened in this part, it was a short sweet section of Gran Turismo 7's life cycle. With the Tomahawk gone, players were looking for other alternative glitch builds. The main ones were the Alpine race car and of course the likes of the wonky and broken Chevy Corvette ZR1. At this point in time, again, they weren't as fast as the likes of the Tomahawk, but they were great alternatives that still took advantage of some of the tuning system glitches. You were able to earn around about 2 million credits on this one, constantly once again running the Tokyo 600 event, the most abusable of those 4 events. However, we then got a break. The Tomahawk returned with one of the September updates. Somehow and some way, someone managed to find another 600 pp build for the thing, and whilst it definitely wasn't as good as it once was, it was still a return to form, and once again the fastest way to get credits in GT7. Once again, giving Polyphony the middle finger, we were able to earn an average of 2.2 million plus credits every single hour in game. However, with the second Tomahawk, it really just wasn't as good as the original. It was a much more difficult beast to drive, it was much more difficult to go ahead and get that clean race bonus. Overall, it really just wasn't as good as the original. However, as mentioned, it was still the best way to make credits, and it was absolutely hilarious to see Polyphony patch this car out, think it's all safe, and then all of a sudden, the thing returns again out of the blue. It was fairly short-lived though. Polyphony did manage to get on top of this one relatively quickly. I think it was around for around about a month maximum before it once again faded from existence. Now next up we have the Aero Glitch Era. This was the era after the second Tomahawk, where really we saw the majority of the cars just being insanely aero kitted and once again running at Tokyo with some very wacky results. Now the main aim of these cars was to get some pretty varying results with the Aero, so you'd just kind of swap it about until all of a sudden you hit a massive drop in the performance point calculation. This would then allow some of the fastest street cars in game to go ahead and enter the 600 event. I mean, these things were topping out at around about 230 miles per hour. Couple that with wall riding, and it was almost like an AFK method. It was absolutely ridiculous. We also saw more prominent cars such as the Suzuki on multiple different compounds, which still exists today. Now in terms of the other cars, there was things like Aston Martins, AMG Mercedes, SLRs. It was just absolutely ridiculous. There was a bunch of different cars that could go ahead and perform the Aero Glitch Era, and this really became the major go-to. Now for a long time these cars were in game and new cars were popping up almost weekly, so it was a great time to go ahead and earn some credits. And whilst it wasn't majorly different like the Tomahawk payouts, overall it did allow you to run it much quicker and again just reduce that time you're spending grinding for those faster and more expensive cars in game. I remember dedicating an entire week just to getting some of these Aero Glitch cars out. I'd do one and then all of a sudden someone would just message me on PSN saying, look, oh, I've got another one, this is a 19-20 minute build sort of thing, use wall riding, put all the assists on and it'll just kind of stick. So it was definitely a pretty cool era in GT7, and once again just felt like a bit of an offshoot of the whole Tomahawk era. So whilst the Tomahawk was absolutely dead and gone at this point, we did still have other major cars that were capable of hitting 230 to 240 miles per hour and just using the advantage of the wall ride without receiving that clean race bonus penalty. So overall you was looking around about anywhere from 2 to 2.2 million credits per hour. Then we hit the quiet time. So this era ran for the majority of 2023. It ran from around about April up until November, and whilst there was still some odd here and there new glitch builds coming up, it was mainly engine swap builds that were able to take advantage once again of 600 pp. The majority of the big glitches were entirely absent from here. Again, it was all really in this era about taking advantage of the tuning system and just finding faster ways to get the time down by a couple of minutes on some of these events. Again, mainly it came from the engine swap builds because they'd become viable at this point. So we saw some of the Silvias, the RX-7s, MX-5s, all really taking the reins for the 600 pp grind at this point, and that's really how it was for the majority of 2023. A lot of the big glitches were just absolutely absent all the way up until November of 2023, when of course Spec 2 and the whole overhaul of GT7 happened. Yep, next up the AFK era. This was a short-lived month where most players in the game were rubber banding their controller and using the plucky little Fiat Abarth 500. We were also slapping in K20 engine swaps to the Abarth, also taking advantage of the brand new custom race settings, which actually gave you a bonus for completing the gold medal circuit experience as well as hitting the maximum level. Once you got that 400% bonus, you would make a ridiculous AFK tune for the K20 swap to Bath and then go ahead and just glitch out one of the Tomahawks so that it just runs like crap, although it's still running at a massively high PP. You'd then go into a custom race, set a bunch of set in stone settings, and it will pay you out a ridiculous amount, because for the game it's thinking that the car's not got the engine swap and it's running at a majorly low PP rating, running up against of course the Tomahawk X. So at that point you go ahead, set up your custom race and then just rubber band your controller. Again, it could be run manually if you wanted to, but the majority of the time you just strap up the controller, ride the wall, put the nitrous on and away you go. At this point players were able to earn a whopping 4 to 4.5 million credits per hour, the most we'd ever seen in GT7 history, and well, of course Polyphony could not be having that, could they? Honestly, I would say this was one of the best eras of GT7 we've ever seen, not just for the money glitch, but the fact that Spec 2 dropped alongside it meant there was a ton of content to go and get, and players were really just wanting to buy all the cars in the game. Honestly, it was a fantastic time to play this game, but unfortunately Polyphony, being the killjoys they are, did not want players earning that much money per hour. power. Again, it was just a massive middle finger to those ridiculous microtransactions a year and a half earlier. So what happened next? We had the AFK2 method, well, after Polyphony really got rid of that first one. So this one is the current day method. It involves the Honda beat, some aero glitching, and once again it takes advantage of the 400% bonus as well as the custom races as well. However, there's a slight difference to this one. So what happens is you're going to be making 2 different tuning sheets for the K20 swap once again. One running at 200 to 300 pp. This will be the janky little build that we're going to go ahead and enter the event in. Then in terms of the second build, you actually make a maximum potential build using the parts from the original build. So any of the permanent parts will have to be carried over, which usually gives you a rating in the 400 to 500 pp range. You then just go ahead and swap back to the least amount of performance point build, and once again copy the settings just like the above, where the Tomahawk X is running at some ridiculous gearing ratios. However, with the payouts absolutely nerfed and the game now taking advantage of the engine swap and realizing that it is there, what happens is it will give you a relatively low payout. Now the good thing is it's once again fully AFK or manual depending on how you want to run it. But what you do is go ahead, enter with the low build, and then switch to your maximum as you get in the event. At that point, it's still going to calculate that you're in the low PP build and pay you out more than if you was just doing it normally. At this point, you go ahead and slap up the Tomahawks once again with the nitrous, and that is it. So that's the entire history of all the money glitches in Gran Turismo 7. Of course, we've seen some individual builds across time, but this is mainly highlighting the different eras that we've seen so far. So whilst we've seen the end of the Tomahawk eras, we've seen the end of the original AFK era, I don't think this tug-of-war battle between the playbase and Polyphony is really going to end anytime soon. In fact, just looking back, this should really be a wake-up call for Polyphony to go ahead and sort out that economy and cater it more towards the player base. Again, GT7 is going to be 3 years old next year, and it just doesn't seem like the excuse to continue doing it this way. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to join me tomorrow for another money grind video. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care, guys. Peace.